Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining my channel, Conversations with Rudy Rivera. It's part of my YouTube channel, Conversations with Rudy Rivera. So please click and subscribe and like, and you'll hear many more videos. Today, it's a great pleasure to have with me Jason Levin, an executive coach, a person who takes people and raises them to stardom, has placed many people, and not placed, but has helped many people achieve an incredible amount of success. Jason, thank you for joining us.
Rudy, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad you were here. Jason, tell us a little bit about your trajectory, about how you get to where you are. Because I think for a person who's an executive coach who trains people on how to be better, there had to be some point where you got to this point and said, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, for me, I've always been interested in why are people succeeding and why people are not succeeding. It started in high school when my dad lost the only job he ever had during the recession of 1990. And so even in high school, I was reading the Wall Street Journal and Forbes and Fortune to better understand what is the executive mindset. So even before I became a coach, I was that friend of yours that was helping you figure out your internship search or your job search. And as I progressed, so did a lot of my colleagues. And so I've been doing this now for 10 years where I've been helping executives in transition, figuring out their next step or how they can get promoted within their own organizations. Or if you're in a professional services practice, helping attorneys and consultants and accountants be able to raise their profile so they can build a book of business. So I find a great deal of joy in it. It's a lot of fun, and I can't believe it's been 10 years now.
It's been 10 years that you're doing that. Well, you're a little younger than me, but in my case, I'm a lawyer, as you know.
Yes.
I've always wanted to be a lawyer since I was in the seventh grade.
Yeah.
So I can imagine you at a young age thinking this is what you're destined to do.
It's funny. There wasn't a word for what I do. There was never,
Exactly.
there was not a word. This notion of being a coach was not a thing. And it's funny how I got into, being a coach was maybe 12 or 13 years ago. So I did my MBA at Georgetown, and I had went to work for Unilever in New York, and then I came back to DC to be with my lovely attorney spouse. And who reached out but the MBA Career Center at Georgetown? They said, "Well, why don't you come coach for us?" And that request got me thinking in a whole new way. I was like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, you'd be perfect. You'd be a really great coach." And so it took somebody to call me a coach for me to even begin to think about that, which then launched a side business. And then the side business turned into the actual business. So it's funny how even, that notion of what do you want to be when you grow up, who knows what the names of professions will be 20 or 30 years from now that, we didn't even have when we were growing up.
I'm amazed even now with the different professions that now it's all cybersecurity. We never thought about cybersecurity when I was growing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I, I think a problem I see in your field is that often people expect results quickly. So I was a wrestler, and I knew, and I did competitive judo, and I knew to be good, I had to put in the hours. But I think many people think they're going to talk to a coach for a few minutes, and from then on, you're going to help them with this colossal resume, and they're going to start getting job offers right away. They seem to expect immediate results.
And it's, I'm glad you're talking about this because, whether you're in your 40s or your 50s or your 60s, you've made all these habits and trajectories within the things that you do. You have a set of relationships, you have a set of accomplishments, you have your own goals. And if you are going to invite a coach in, and I say this all the time, you need to be able to do the work. And there is a great deal of work that needs to take place outside of the sessions that you have with your coach. And it could take months or years, depending on what you're looking to do, to evolve in the trajectory that you're looking for. So yes, you were not built in a day, and certainly when you work with a coach, your evolution will not, happen in a day either.
It takes practice and practice and practice. My 17-year-old son decided he was going to wrestle out of the blue his sophomore year in high school. I thought he was body snatched at first. And I asked him why. He said, well, if he wins, it's because of him. If he loses, because of him.
Right.
So I said to his coach, I wish you would have started earlier. The coach said, it's not when you start, it's what you do when you start. And
Right.
I think that's a good lesson for life, because my son qualified for state his second year,
Wow.
which was incredible. One of 3 people, because he built the dedication. He had the dedication, he had the drive, and it was a goal he wanted to reach.
Right.
How often do you see people that come to you and just say, okay, fix me? and then you talk to them again, and they haven't done anything in preparation.
Right, right. And it's not that unusual that, an exec, in their 50s or 60s might say to me, I've been doing what I've been doing for so long that I don't know what I want next. And so that classic question of I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, it actually never goes away. And the reason it never goes away is because you've got these 2 continuums that are taking place: you and your relationship to yourself, and then what's going on in the market. And so being excited about something, sometimes you just forget. Sometimes you need to talk things through to actually figure out what's that wrestling thing, or what's that thing that really gets you to a place that either you're looking for meaning, or you're looking, whatever it is that you're looking for. And then when you find what you're looking for, then it becomes a lot easier to bring other people in. But that question of, what's my wrestling, is a real one. It's hard.
What do you want to be when you grow up? I think even haunts me today. If you ask me for my ideal job, it would be to be a singer in the band or a drummer with the Rolling Stones. I think the Rolling Stones have an opening.
Right.
But I think if we don't continue to question that, then there's no way to improve. If you don't constantly question what it is you are, where you are, what you want to be, it's easy to become stagnant. It's easy to say, well, I've been doing this forever and ever. And as you know, just from companies that we've seen fall, like Blockbuster, companies that don't innovate, companies that don't think about the market. I think you as an individual have to think about that yourself. How do I innovate myself? How do I reinvent myself?
Sure. And it really gets back to that whole self-awareness piece around what is it that you are truly good at that's valued in the market. And you can take that a step further, because I think the word strengths can be even bifurcated into what are the things that you're good at that bring you energy. You might have done something for decades that you're good at, but then it tires you, it fatigues you. And by Friday night, you're like, all right, thank God I don't have to do that anymore. And then Sunday night, you're back at, oh my gosh, I have to do that again this week. And so being able to do things that you bring you energy actually reinforces this notion of you getting better at something because it's actually energizing you.
I agree with you 100% on that. And you have several things that you're really good at, but you have to pick one. Even if several things you're passionate about, you have to pick one, maybe 2, because you have to focus on those. And if you don't focus, you end up being, that expression, the jack of all trades, the master of none.
Yeah, and it's not like you can ignore the other things completely. There might be 1 or 2 things that in your day job that you focus on, and then you use a hobby or a nonprofit organization, or you were talking about music. Rudy making money as a full-time musician. Who knows? But at the very least, that could be something that you do on the side while you're a lawyer by day, so that you're looking at yourself as an entire portfolio, and there are things that live on a continuum, the professional you and then the personal you. And sometimes there's overlap.
And sometimes there's not.
True.
Sometimes they're totally separate and you're living in two different worlds.
True. True.
I think there's another area I want to talk to you about, Jason. That is that people have a tendency to really sabotage themselves. I see it quite a bit. I see people who will say, I can't because.
Right.
For example, a spouse who's been at home working, stay at home mom or dad for years, raised kids, and now wants to go into the workforce.
Right.
And I've heard these people say to themselves, well, I've been out of the workforce for so long that what am I going to offer? I don't have the experience. And I've often said, nothing ever learned is wasted. You learn things as a spouse staying at home, such as conflict negotiations, managing a budget. There are a lot of things that you have to really learn and juggle, and those can be applied. And I've seen many people who've had the hiatus and have done extremely well, and other people who just kept saying, "Oh, I can't because, and I can't because." So you never get anywhere.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, my wife, whose home office is upstairs, she has a whole talk on the leadership skills you gain as a parent because of all the things that you're articulating. That you need to be able to be flexible. You need to be able to negotiate with a terrorist. You need, you know.
Yeah, I mean, a 5-year-old kid is the terrorist, right? That's who you negotiate with.
Hard. It's hard. You know, it's you know, the ultimate marathon. But you know, you're hitting on something that's really important is that you know, what's that internal monologue that you have in your head, and that internal monologue can either serve you or not serve you. And you know, in working with my clients and talking with you know, therapists and psychiatrists, I actually I'm in the process of finishing up my book. I have a whole chapter on what I'm calling the Bermuda Triangle, where, you know, in the Bermuda Triangle, you know, ships and planes went and, you know, never returned. And you can have your own Bermuda Triangle, which has 3 pillars: fear, guilt, and worry. And any one of those things can keep you away from actually self-selecting into opportunities for yourself. And so, you know, what I'm often working with my clients on to get out of their own personal Bermuda triangles, whether it's keeping in touch or self-selecting into an opportunity or even trying, is actually to journal it down. Write down what you're actually worried about, concerned about, and then you write down what's a possible scenario, what's a possible favorable scenario. And actually moving away from the emotional piece to a logical piece actually starts to get people in a frame of mind that they can leave their personal Bermuda triangles.
Well, they can leave their comfort zone. I'm a big believer that misery loves company.
Right.
And when you're miserable and other people are miserable, then you're in a safe place. I often think, and I'd like your opinion on this, is people are often afraid of success too.
Sure.
There's a great movie with Robert Redford. Remember The Candidate?
Yeah.
After he goes through that whole campaign and he's elected, he goes to his campaign manager. Now what do I do?
Yeah, it's saying, am I really good enough? Why me? Am I deserving of this?
Some
And
psychologists call that the imposter syndrome.
yes, so definitely imposter syndrome exists. And you know, one of the things that I often talk about, I mean, I've lived it myself, I've seen it in success for others, is that you need to surround yourself with a team of people. So when you have those moments, that you're able to share that in a discreet way and to be able to, you know, release it and then have someone say, all right, now you've released it. Like, all right, keep going, keep going. But yes, it's important to acknowledge those things. But then, you know, you have that close cohort of people that are helping you along the way. So the candidate had their campaign manager, right? So we all have our own campaign managers. I mean, mine lives upstairs. So
Well, also, your wife is probably your chief encourager too, and you're her chief encourager.
right,
You also need people to help you along to say that you can do it. But there are people in life who are always going to tell you no.
sure,
But I think the most powerful no is the one you say to yourself.
Yeah.
with a capital N. And that's the obstacle you create. Then you begin to sabotage yourself.
Right.
I'm I'm not. I mean, I'm a huge, huge believer in positive energy brings positive actions.
Sure.
So the moment you decide that you are going to do something, and even if you take the smallest step, it's like the cosmos start to align and things start to fall in place. But if you no longer move that in that direction, nothing's ever going to happen. I think the mistake that people often make is they want the success to come quickly and
Sure.
they measure their success by that long goal. But they have to consider, I think, the successes, short term successes that you have to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you're talking about. I mean, there's a whole set of research on mini habits.
Hmm.
So instead of like, I need to write an entire book, can you write a sentence? Can you just write one sentence today? Or, I find it really difficult to keep in touch because I know 100 people. Well, can you start with one? Can you start with one by the end of the week? And you're exactly right. Being able to move away from this enormous piece of, oh my God, how am I going to do this, to like, all right, what's my next action? And if I can do that one action, you can actually move forward. Daniel Pink, the thought leader, he talks about the MIT. What's my most important task? So at night, he writes down, okay, tomorrow, if I do nothing else, my MIT is, and that way, waking up in the morning, there's a clear idea. All right, here's what I need to do today because here's where I want to be. So everybody should have an MIT.
I like that MIT. I was thinking Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's the most
Right.
important. It's the most important task.
Yeah, it's the most important task. It's your priority, right? So we all have our calendars and we all have our things, and meetings happen to us and things happen to us and adversity happens to us. But if you are to carve things that are important to you, having a daily MIT is like, all right, I need to get this done somehow, some way before I go to bed. And you feel that sense of accomplishment because you've picked at least one thing.
Sure, and I think you have to also expect that you're going to fail at some of those things.
Yes.
Uh, Person I admire is Winston Churchill, and he was plagued with successes and fears and failures. And one of my favorite Winston Churchill line, there are many, but my favorite one is success is not final and failure is not fatal.
Right.
And when you look at the story of Abraham Lincoln, he's filed bankruptcy, been broke, lost elections, and his final goal was president of the United States. I find that people will not remember the failures once you succeed. They'll
Sure.
just remember that you succeeded. If you look at Elon Musk, for example, he was on the verge of going broke. And now he probably surpassed Bezos as richest man in the world. I'd have to fact check that. I don't want CNN fact checking me, but he's pretty darn rich.
Sure.
And you have to also be, I think, available and of the mindset to take the risk.
Yeah. And I think there's a certain amount of pain that people go through in failing. And again, it hurts here in the heart, it hurts here intellectually. And to be able to process that pain, and then it's okay, what's the next step? What did I learn from this? If I were to have done this over again, how would I go about this? What is my takeaway from this? And you get back to a logical approach of, all right, I failed, it didn't work out. And, you've kind of processed that pain. You're able to move in a different direction because you've learned something from actually trying. So the classic trial and error, it works, but you have to get beyond the notion of how you feel after a failure. So.
When you look at Thomas Edison and how many times it took him to create the light bulb, he says, those are failures. Those are just ways I found out that didn't work.
Right.
Until they found the one way that did work.
And and that you're describing people have this natural curiosity where they see every single opportunity as a test. And if it works, awesome. And if it doesn't work, they've learned something and they continue to test and test and test until they figure out their invention or whatever it is. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
I call that your personal invention. What's your personal invention? You are the product of that personal invention. How you invent yourself within your environment.
Right.
With this pandemic, I've heard people say, oh my God, things are just terrible. I can't go out, I can't meet and greet people. But I think it's really the contrary. You now have more opportunity with the technology we have to reach out and connect to people than you ever did before.
Yeah. And, and part of the piece that I studied in my book was we are wired to connect. We are all wired to connect, introvert, extrovert. Even during the pandemic, the introverts are even lonely, because we need people. And to your point, while it's not the in-person interaction, the ability to just write a note to somebody and say, let's grab some time over the phone, or can we grab some time on a video conference? There is an enormous amount of opportunity to connect with people. And I think that's the big, one of the big aha moments for all of us is that loneliness can really be detrimental to the human spirit. And so even having your tribe throughout this, and it could even just be a quick text message with an emoji to somebody that you like, so that you can have some type of connection. But I agree with you. Technology, especially in this time, has been critical to be able to see how your family members are doing. I mean, there were periods of time we couldn't travel. It's quite powerful stuff. So I agree with you that having technology is allowing people to connect in ways that we otherwise couldn't.
And in places that you normally would have to travel.
Yeah.
And you can, like in the world of professional speakers, for example, there's more opportunities for them now because they can Zoom to a group in Korea, for example, or to a group in Mexico. They don't no longer have to get on the plane.
Yeah.
It has brought some challenges because you have to learn to be creative. You cannot just be a talking head.
Sure.
You have to be dynamic, but I think the pandemic has created more opportunity and more chance for reflection. I'm of the belief, Jason, that every morning you get up and say, what part of my goal am I going to accomplish?
Yeah.
So where the person you mentioned does it at night, I tend to do it in the morning.
Okay.
What's my goal today?
Right.
What goal? What am I going to do to reach that particular goal, or get a step closer?
Right. Right. Yeah, but it's what's great about it, Rudy, is that you're setting the intention. You're setting an
Yes.
intention, and that for you're delivering a daily GPS to yourself. All right, here's where I want to be.
And here's where I want to go.
Right. And so the day can happen to you in a whole host of ways. Something might happen at work or whatever it is, but at least you've started the day with an intention of like, okay, here's where I want to be. And that gets you closer to the things that you're actually excited about.
Well, when you're talking with an executive, we're talking now about your personal life and what you should do to get the goals. But when you're talking to somebody who's already at a good level, who in many ways for other people would consider him or her a success.
Sure.
Doesn't the same process apply? The same rules, the same procedure?
I mean, it's essentially similar. One thing that I find that evolves and changes is once money is not the primary motivator, where you're at a level of success where you're like, I'm fine now. And then, it's, I call it the M&M. You move from money to meaning. And so what I notice in the more senior execs is that they're looking for more meaningful experiences. So whether that's in public service, that's in the nonprofit community, that's somewhere where they're finding their own meaning. And that takes time also. So process similar, but once you take money out of the equation, then it really gets back to what's important to them.
But don't you find that even people who are well accomplished still need to learn a few things?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's, I've always been a lifelong learner, and it's fun to connect with people, in their 50s and 60s where they've recognized, like, I need to do something. I can't do this myself. And, part of it is internal, but then, like, okay, what do I need to learn to actually get out there and make it happen? And for those that are willing to, have that, to be a little bit, in a place where it's welcoming somebody else in, that's a really big deal. That's a really big deal that, and that, can cause a huge fear. I'm 50 or I'm 60 and I know all these great things. And to be able to, admit to someone, I don't know this. And so that takes a high level of self-esteem to actually say, I don't know something. And yet people still do it, which is great. And so that meaning is really important to them.
Well, I'm a big believer in humility,
Yeah.
and that you go through life believing you don't know all the answers. A problem I see with executives is that they think, I've been doing this for so long, I've got all this experience, I can do it correctly. Why do I need to learn anything? That really borders on arrogance. And in my mind, arrogance is when you begin to crumble.
Yeah.
The one thing I learned from wrestling and judo is that there's always somebody better and stronger and faster than you, and anybody can lose at any particular time.
Sure.
Even the best person can lose. I used to spar with a guy who could wipe the mat with everybody. And he was Polish guy, super tough, super strong. But whenever he got to a tournament, he would choke and lose to somebody who wasn't as good as he was.
Right.
So you get to that choking effect. But I think executives can also take a page from your book. It's one of those situations where you never stop learning. And if you think you're at the peak of what you're doing, then you're not. The precipice is always somewhere down the road, because
Yeah.
you can always be better.
Yeah, I mean, even execs in their 50s and 60s, whether it's, peer-to-peer mentoring relationships or reverse mentoring, or there are a number of different ways where you can just get out there and see what's available, and be able to continue to ask questions, and so for me, learning is founded in your own curiosity. It's curiosity about yourself and curiosity on what's going on in the world.
I'm working on a small book also, but one of the chapters is arrogance is the beginning of failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
What advice what's the most common advice you give to business executives? What's the one common thread that you see that you say, look, this is what you need to do?
Well, I think it's being able to stop looking left and looking right at what other people are doing, and being able to look in the mirror about what's important to them. And it's very easy to get projection of other people's values onto you. And so often my biggest piece of advice is my advice on advice is, I think there's a difference between people actually looking out for your interests, and there's people that are telling you what they wish they had done. Right. So that's my advice on advice.
My old law partner used to say, if my aunt had a mustache, she'd be my uncle. If. I think you need to stop living life with if. And that's what happened in the past, and look to the future.
Yeah, there's all ed, again, I'm a big fan of Daniel Pink. He's coming out with a book on regret, right? And we all have regrets, right? But at the same time, most of the regrets are for not doing something. And so often when I'm working with someone, they want to act, they want to make a decision, they want to move in a direction. And it's going from that inaction to some type of action that's getting them closer to where they want to be.
Yeah, that's a great Sinatra song. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. And I agree 100% with you. Regrets are not so much what people did, but what they didn't do.
Right.
And right. But what about there's mixed opinions about a plan B.
Right.
Okay. When I was trying to get to law school, there was no plan B. I don't know. I'm just going to make it. And Arnold Schwarzenegger has a very, very good talk that says, don't do plan B. Taking plan B takes away from plan A. What's your opinion on a plan B?
Well, I think you always need something to fall back on, but if you really want to try at something, then make the effort. Don't come up with a plan A and then only give it a half effort. Make the effort to see if it's going to work, and then the marketplace will tell you. Usually the market never lies. As a former consumer marketer for Unilever, I love market feedback because your consumer is telling you things. This is working. This is not working. I'm purchasing this. I'm not purchasing that. And so your plan A, treat it as a business case. All right, I'm going to give it everything I have, and this is what I'm going to go for, and make the effort. And if it works, great. If it works half of it, then you're closer to where you want to be. So, any hypothesis, any plan needs to be changed anyway, right? The moment that you go to execute the plan, you need to be able to make modifications and adjustments and those kinds of things.
You need to be adaptable.
Right.
You need to be adaptable. I mean, I've reinvented myself several times in my career, from solo practitioner to a Fortune 500 company. If you look at what I did before and what I'm doing now, there's really, on its face, doesn't look like there's a connection. But when you go behind it, those things I learned back then help me for what I'm doing now.
Right. So you were taking 20 or 30% of your work, and you were able to make the case to somebody and be able to put yourself in an entirely new organization and build trust around, all right, I know this, and I can help you with this because of what I know here. And
exactly.
To make that transition. But it didn't happen overnight, right?
I was in practice for 25 plus years.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah, it's one of those things. Well, Jason, I mean, I'm really grateful that you took the time. I think we're going to have a part 2 to this conversation. But before we leave, though, just tell us about your book, when it's going to be published, and what really the primary subject matter is of the book.
Sure. Happy to. Thank you. So my book is Relationships to Infinity, The Art and Science of Keeping in Touch. It comes out either December 2021 or January 2022. The whole premise of the book is we say keep in touch, and yet we struggle to do so. So my book is trying to answer the question, why are we not keeping in touch? What are the benefits of keeping in touch? And how you can come up with your own keep in touch plan to actually get ahead, to actually get a promotion, career change, build a professional services practice. Huge fan of keeping in touch as opposed to this nonsense networking that people are trying to do. So
I know that's what I call machine gun networking.
Yeah.
Machine gun networking. And they just throw out anything out. Throw meaningful notes. I mean, and with LinkedIn, it's so easy to stay networked. It's so easy to do it. I equate LinkedIn like being at a dance.
Yeah.
You can stand in the corner and not dance with anybody, or you can go out and mingle. So
absolutely. And there's, that's the great thing about technology is technology helps us keep in touch. And if you're doing it in the right way, then you're dancing in the right way. So.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate you taking the time. For all of you who've listened, please click again, subscribe to my channel. And Jason, if people want to get a hold of you, they can get a hold of you at Ready, Set, Launch.
Yes, readysetlaunch.net. My email is jason@readysetlaunch.net.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you,
Good to talk to you.
Appreciate you. Thank you.